Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Brandon, and welcome back to Marotta Media. First and foremost, I know I've said this a lot in my past videos, but I apologize for my extended absence. It's been a few weeks since I last made a review, and believe me, there's some good reasons for that. Mainly, it's just because I've been so busy with work lately, and when I actually have had some free time, I've spent it in different ways. Mostly, I've been too busy playing Mass Effect or watching the NBA Finals. Fuck you, Lakers. But I finally have enough free time to make a review of one of my most anticipated movies of the year, A Quiet Place Part 2. A Quiet Place Part 2 is the sequel to this 2018 film of the same name, aside from the Part 2. And that movie was one of my favorite movies of that year. And honestly, the first time I saw that movie was probably the most unique theater experience that I have ever had. I remember I went with some friends of mine and the whole theater was just absolutely packed to the brim. I remember this was also pre-COVID, so all of the seats were filled. There wasn't spaces in between. I did not anticipate that the auditorium would be so quiet. I know that may be stupid of me not to realize that in the moment, but I did not think it would be that extreme. There was nobody that was making a sound. It was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. And funny story, during the screening of that movie, I usually get a Kit Kat when I go to the movies, and I had a Kit Kat in this instance, and I think you'll be able to tell where I'm going with this. When it was really quiet in the auditorium, I tried eating my candy bar, but it was so freaking loud. So if you've seen the first Quiet Place, you'll remember there's a scene where they're at a waterfall and it's pretty loud. In that moment, I just completely scarfed down my candy bar. But alright, I'm done with my tangent that you probably don't care about anyway. But A Quiet Place Part 2 picks up right where the first movie left off. Well, sort of, but I'll get to that. At the end of the first movie, the Abbotts are trapped in their farmhouse and they need to make their way out after their baby was born. And their father, Lee, played by John Krasinski, died at the end of the first movie. Spoilers, but it's been a few years, so I don't think anybody should have a problem with me saying that. But the family makes their way out of the farmhouse and they realize that the creatures that hunt by hearing are not the only dangers that lurk around the sandpath. Like I said, this movie picks up right where the last one left off. However, it does start with a flashback. And this sequence is about 10 minutes that takes us back to the day where all of this began. And honestly, this might be one of the best opening sequences I've seen in recent memory. Just everything about it was done so well. John Krasinski's direction really comes through at the beginning here. And I also really like when post-apocalyptic movies take us back to show us how we got to this point. I don't know, I've always just really enjoyed seeing how the epidemic started. But in A Quiet Place Part 2, we still follow the Abbott family. Mother Evelyn, played by Emily Blunt, her deaf daughter Reagan, played by Millicent Simmons, her son Marcus, played by Noah Jupe, and her newborn son, whose name I don't know. I don't think they ever mention what his name was. And we are introduced to a new character, Emmett, played by Cillian Murphy. And I absolutely loved the addition of his character. It was so nice to see a new face aside from just the Abbotts because that's who we got most of in the first movie. Not to say that that's a bad thing, but I love that they were able to introduce a new character who they knew before the outbreak happened. But what I really appreciated about the addition of Emmett is the contrast between him and the Abbotts, specifically Reagan. Reagan is a very optimistic young girl who feels that there's a lot of hope left in the world, and you could tell that she definitely gets that from her mother. And Emmett, on the other hand, is very cynical and feels that life at this point is just meaningless, and the only thing that you need to do is survive. There's nothing more than that. There's even a few moments where Reagan and Emmett actually venture out, just the two of them, and I'm not sure what it was. Maybe it was the fact that it was a older man with a younger girl as they were venturing through a post-apocalyptic landscape, but these scenes really reminded me of The Last of Us. And I mean that in the absolute best way possible, because The Last of Us is an amazing game. And hot take for you, The Last of Us 2 was also a fantastic game. Sorry, but that's just my opinion. Even the sounds that the creatures make, it's like this clicking sound, and it reminded me of, surprise, surprise, the clickers from The Last of Us. But this movie just has a constant sensation of tension and suspense. And I think A Quiet Place Part 2 pulls off the most important element of what makes horror movies scary. They're scary in a way that they build suspense through what might happen rather than what is going to happen, if that makes any sense. Because there were several moments where you just knew something was about to happen, but you weren't exactly sure what. But you were just on the edge of your seat waiting to see what was going to happen. And it's brought together through such beautiful editing. Because there are moments where these characters are separated from one another. As I mentioned, Reagan and Emmett go out together. Then Evelyn will venture out by herself, and Marcus is also doing his own thing. And there's a few moments where something happens to all of these characters, and it cuts between all of them, and it's just done so perfectly. But I also really liked how we were able to get a feel of what the world was like outside of the farm. Because in the first one, we didn't really know about the outside world. It was a pretty isolated movie focused on just one family, and there's nothing wrong with that because the first movie was fantastic, but I really liked how they ventured outside of it. And no spoilers, but we do meet some pretty interesting and shady characters along the journey. But I think the thing that I appreciate most about A Quiet Place Part 2 is that it's not just a horror movie. It's also kind of a coming-of-age story. Because a lot of the focus in this movie is put on the kids. Reagan and Marcus both just lost their father, so he's not there to protect them and their mother anymore. And meanwhile, their mother has a newborn child that she needs to take care of. So it's kind of about how the kids need to grow up and fend for themselves in this horrible world that they live in. And that's an element that I did not expect at all, but it was done so well. But that being said, there are some things in this movie that I didn't quite like. One of the smaller things that I can look past because it only happened in like one or two scenes, and that's the fact that some of the characters talk a little too quietly. I mean, they need to talk quietly because, they need to be quiet, obviously, but there's a few moments where they were speaking a little too softly and I couldn't quite understand what they were saying. But this doesn't happen that often. Like I said, it only happens in maybe a scene or two, but still, I would have liked to have known what they said in that moment. There's also a point in the story where a certain character makes a very questionable decision, and I didn't quite understand why they did this. If you've seen the movie, I feel like people will know what I'm talking about, but I feel like the decision they made didn't really add anything to the story. It was kind of just there to progress the story in a way, so I guess I'm willing to look past it. But easily, my biggest complaint with this movie is its ending. The ending had such a tremendous build-up, and then it kind of just cuts to black and then credits start rolling. I was like, wait, what? That's how it ends? Like, really? You can't end it right there. It's not that the ending itself was bad, it was more so where they chose to end it. I feel like if there was maybe another 5-10 minutes added on, then it would have been perfect, but they chose to cut it in a really interesting spot, and I didn't quite understand the choice behind it. One more thing that I need to say. This is not a complaint about the movie, but it's a complaint about moviegoers themselves. There was a guy in the theater that I was in who would not stop talking throughout the whole movie. And since it was very quiet in certain moments, I was able to make out a few of the things this guy said. For example, in the flashback sequence at the beginning, this guy legitimately said out loud, "Oh, is that from the first one? Oh, I didn't see the first one." Dude, then why the hell are you here? The movie is called A Quiet Place Part 2, so why are you watching the second movie if you haven't seen the first one? Because let me tell you, it is absolutely vital that you watch the first one before you watch the second one. And that is the rule with most movies. So that's just my quick little rant about people who come to the movies not knowing where they are and just showing up completely unprepared. Okay, that's all. I just had to get that off my chest really quick. But other than that, A Quiet Place Part 2 is a very solid sequel and absolutely worthy of the original. But would I say it's better than the original? I don't know if I would go that far. I think I would put them on par with each other, actually, because this one I think was just as good. It wasn't better and it wasn't really worse. John Krasinski killed it once again as a director with this film, and I can't wait to see what he does next. And a third movie is apparently already in the works, and I can't wait to see it. And overall, I would give A Quiet Place Part 2 an 8 out of 10. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching my review of A Quiet Place Part 2. If you guys saw this movie, then let me know what you thought about it. Did you think it was just as good as the first one, or did you think it was worse, or hell, did you think it was even better? If you guys like this review, then be sure to hit that thumbs up, and do not forget to subscribe. If you want to see my past reviews, I will link those right over here. Other than that, I hope you all have a tremendous rest of your day. I will see you all next time.